So after filming how I flushed and replaced my car's coolant at a service center that uses a special machine, a mobile merchant dropped by to demonstrate how the coolant he is selling is far superior than most, if not all, the popular coolant brands sold locally. Well, obviously, we wouldn't take his word for it, so he brought a device which showed us compelling evidence that there's some truth to his claim. And the succeeding is a footage of our eye-opening encounter. We first tested the actual coolant we just poured into my radiator. This is a ready-to-use mix. The mobile merchant, let's call him Eddie, asked me how much coolant did I expect to be in my solution. And I said quite confidently that I've always known it to be 50-50, 50% coolant and 50% water. So with a single drop of my coolant onto this device, which I later learned is called a refractometer, I initially read that my mix contained 10% water and therefore had 90% coolant. So I was kind of proud of my coolant. But since this was the first time I've used a refractometer and didn't know how to read it properly, Eddie explained that it's actually the other way around. My mix only had 10% coolant and the rest was just water. Shocker.
May puti siya sa ilalim. Yun lang yung coolant niya. Halos tubig lang laman.
Okay. To be certain that the first test wasn't just a fluke, we grabbed another local ready-to-use coolant brand to place under the proverbial microscope. At this point, it got me curious. Why is it that there's nothing on the product labels that indicate the coolant-to-water ratio? Eddie explained that in Japan, where his brand is imported from, all coolant manufacturers are required by law to specify the coolant-to-water ratio on their labels. It's a startling contrast in the Philippines, where there's no regulation about this. For all we know, manufacturers could just be sticking on cool-looking labels on plastic bottles and charging unwitting consumers steep prices for products that just contain mostly water.
30% higit. Kita yung coolant.
Ayun, nakikita kahit pa paano.
See the horizon? This is where coolant and water is separated. Below the horizon represents the coolant portion, while above the horizon represents the water portion. Thus, this test sample only contains 35% coolant and the rest is just water. For a product that costs about 300 pesos per liter, does that sound fair to you? Suppose your radiator needs a total of 4 liters. Are you okay with paying 1,200 pesos for a coolant mix that is mostly just water? After seeing this, I'm inclined to just put water in my radiator directly from the faucet next time. Eddie brought 2 variants of his coolant, the concentrated mix and the ready-to-use mix. We tested Eddie's ready-to-use mix first. I wasn't able to film the actual reading, but it was obvious from our conversation that what we saw through the refractometer was an exact 50-50 mix.
Saktong 50. Parang wala ba mo magic yan? Parang sinungkit
Finally, we tested his concentrated mix. This time, I was able to focus my camera decent enough to see the reading. See for yourself. It clearly contains an impressive 80% coolant. And he's selling this for only 250 pesos per liter. Take note that this is the concentrated version, but it's even cheaper than the ready-to-use mix of the 2 local brands we tested earlier. Shocker. After this encounter, I arrived at 2 undeniable realizations. Number 1, we need government to pass and enforce appropriate regulations to compel coolant manufacturers operating in the Philippines to level up the quality of their products so consumers are getting the value for their money. And number 2, until number 1 is in place, it is my opinion that we are better off just putting water in our radiators because before I saw the results of these tests, the coolants I had been putting in my radiator were nothing more than just a placebo effect.